Go.
Executive Director, this is this May the 1st. This is the Laws and Rules Committee for the Tennessee State Accountancy Board. We have 3 items on our list today. The first of which is the discussion of the exposure draft on the UAA regarding a test. What I have and I think we all may have a copy of the Uniform Accountancy Act, where the definition of a test has been defined, or redefined, I guess would be the word for it. And then if you look on it, actually it's going to be, I think it's page 3 in your Laws and Rules guide. We have our state definition of a test. And at this point, if you compare the two, of course, the first two items, are identical. And then once you get to the third item, which if you're looking in your exposure draft, it says any examination of prospective financial information to be performed in accordance with the statements on standards for attestation engagements. If you go back to your Laws and Rules state guide, if you go to, I guess it would be under 62-1-103, chapter definitions, I think it would be item 1, Article C. It says any examination to be performed in accordance with the statements on standards for attestation engagements. So at that point, the words change. I mean, to me, so I guess what I'm trying to facilitate when we get to this part of the where it's defined, how do we need to? I guess we need to be compliant with the new exposure draft. So I'd like anybody's input on, from that item down, comparing the two statements. What are we in compliant, do you think, or do you think there's some things we need to change to get compliant?
Mr. Chair, this is Gabe. Would you cite that 62-1 - what was it again that you cited?
62-1-103.
103. Thank
Yes,
you.
you're welcome. And I guess for me, prospective financial information compared to any examination, I guess, would be the first, maybe little, I guess, blurb in there. Is there something we need to have to reword to fit that? Because it does seem our definition is a little lax compared to, as far as the wording maybe. What would be the difference? Prospective financial information, and then in our, I'm not sure if it's even in our rule book at that point.
No, but ours says any examination to be performed in accordance with the SSAEs.
Okay.
So it seems like that would include prospective financial information.
Right.
Wouldn't
Okay.
it?
That's what I'll make sure, as long as we see it that way. I just want to make sure I'm not skipping something, I guess.
Mark, this is Gabe. Is there any, were they trying to limit it to future or prospective? Because if ours says any examination, I'm not a practicing CPA, so obviously I'm having a little bit of trouble with having substantive comments on this part of it.
Well, I think what's happening here is they are using prospective financial information as opposed to if number 5 in the exposure draft says any examination, review, or agreed upon procedures engagement to be performed in accordance with the SSAE other than an examination described in subsection 3. I think there's some carve-outs later on as to what applies where, if you will, in regard to the prospective financial information. I think they're trying to carve that out as something kind of separate.
Right.
Okay.
Where were you reading, Mark? Where were you? Page 3?
Page 1, Henry. It's labeled page 1, section 3 definitions.
Mark, do you think the definition in our guide covers, I guess, I'm like I said, I'm kind of asking you on this, but I know in item 4, it says any engagement to be performed in accordance with the standards of the PCAOB. Do you think our rules and guides contain that, or do you think is our rules broad enough, I guess, to cover that or include it? I mean, it's a different board. I mean, it's a different type of board, I guess.
I would say we might want to consider including that particular statement in revision to the law.
Right.
So, Mark, what would your suggestion be for the change in the state rule?
No, Gabe, I think my suggestion would be that we want to include the engagement to be performed in accordance with the standards of the PCAOB. I think we need to definitely include that in there.
Okay.
The others, I think, are going to come down to looking at our definition of compilation, because it does address that later on, and I think that's where we need to concentrate our time.
Right.
Do we want to consider a compilation to be in a test engagement?
Because it's not included
No, it's not included in the UAA
in
definition
the
of a test.
UAA.
They are including prospective financial information, but not compilations.
Not compilations. So do we need, is this where, in your mind, that we might need to consider, I guess that would be, if we want it to be compliant with that don't mean we need to remove that term, do we? Compilation, I mean, would that be, or?
If we're going to be totally compliant with the UAA,
Right.
then we would need to remove compilations
Right.
from our definition of a test.
Does that cause you, do you have an issue with that? Does that cause you any problem in your mind? Is it?
You know, Troy, I've gone back and forth on this in my own mind.
Right.
Are compilations truly in a test function?
Right.
In my mind, I've come to the conclusion they're probably not, because all you're doing is taking information and rearranging it.
Back on.
But on the other hand, our current definition requires that any test engagement be peer reviewed. If you take compilations out of that test definition, then you need to look at determining whether or not you want to have those peer reviewed or included.
It changes a lot of things.
I was going to say,
Yes.
just as a
Changes.
commentary,
Right.
that's a big step.
It's a big step
Yeah.
because it changes all the way down the line, and that's
Yeah.
why.
What we run into on the compilation engagements is they have to be issued in accordance with GAAP. And it's more than just rearranging numbers and that kind of thing. It becomes a headache when you talk about disclosures and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And of course, I have no problem with the way we've defined it in my mind. I mean, as far as we include all three, which
Yes.
is fine. I mean, I just kind of wanted to see how you took and the thing is, removing it, like say, I thought about it, but you have to change a variety of things, and it would take. I'm not sure if I don't see removing it just to match the. I don't.
Okay.
Removing that word or the term, I think it'd be too much to do it. But I do see to add line 4.
Yeah, I just think we need to look at that and perhaps work with the society and get some language, some statute language prepared for the legislature.
Right. Anything else? Is anything else we need to do with that topic at this point? Do we need to
I don't think so. If we're going to leave compilations in a test function for
Okay.
now, then let's just leave it. More.
go from there? Okay.
This
Does
is that's
society have any
primarily the
comment? What's your thoughts on that, Wendy?
Mark covered the comments I wanted to make, especially with regard to compilations, that it will affect in our current rules and laws and rules the peer review outcomes. That's one thing. It was my understanding that one of the changes made to the attest function and that examinations was they took the word financial out to allow engagements that don't report on financial information, CPAs to issue those engagements and kind of expand the scope of what CPAs can offer. So that was the benefit of making the change, and we were kind of already there, which is a good thing. So I think PCOB is important to look at, and we can certainly look at the wording and suggest something to add to that.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next item on the list was we wanted to review, what else we need to do? That's what I mean.
We need to make a
Is there a
motion
motion
to add the
involved, or-
PCAOB language,
Yes, please.
but in regards to the compilation wording, there's nothing to do because we're not making a change.
Not for now.
We're just talking about adding it to this first section of 62-1-103.
Yes, sir.
Item 4,
Item 4 in your, on the,
any engagement to be
Exposure
performed in
draft.
accordance with standards of the PCAOB.
yes.
I don't think I have any objection to that, but I would really, this is more of an SEC type issue when you talk about PCAOB, and I'm just wondering if we ought to hear from some people that do a lot of SEC work about that. Go ahead.
I also think it's worth another, we can certainly look into it further, but any engagement to be performed in accordance with the standards of the PCAOB, those engagements, if they're SEC issue, if they're done by the PCAOB and inspected by the PCAOB, they don't go through the peer review process. So you have to, if you're going to add it to your definition of a test, and then as a test flows throughout your laws and rules, then it's going to say they need to be peer reviewed, and they are inspected by the PCAOB, but those same engagements aren't always peer reviewed because peer review looks at the non-SEC.
I thought that those firms that were doing PCAOB type work, that their peer review had to have the same type of experience when they come in to do the peer review.
They do. Those firms are administered by the AICPA to make sure that happens. But during the actual performance of the peer review itself, the engagements that are inspected by the PCAOB are removed from the scope of the peer review. It's maybe somewhat of a technicality, but I just we want to research that and make sure that we're not adding wording that then's going to cause a problem somewhere else.
Sure.
Do we need to, I guess, table that particular line for lack of, we need some more information, I guess
Sure.
would be,
Let's table that until July.
okay. Anything else we need to do with that item?
No, sir,
Okay.
don't think so.
Thank you. Our next item on the list is a review of Rule 0020-01-13-2C, which I believe in your counting guide would be page 40, and I think it's at the top of the page. And I think item C reads, the fee for biennial renewal of a reciprocal certificate shall be $120. I think Mark had mentioned that we had another change to a fee. I think, Mark, did we dropped the fee a certain amount, and I think this was
$10.
kind of attached to it. We failed to change this one. So Mark, is your suggestion we drop this $10 to match our other change? Is that,
Yes, please.
okay? Is that, what exactly, I'm trying to, in my mind, where would what was our other change to be exact? I mean, which line would that be?
That change was, let's see, Troy. If you'll look in page 32 of your rule book, fees that were charged there under C, renewal of certificate of registration. Your book says $120. We dropped that to 110.
We need to check, okay.
That was effective March the 11th of this year.
So this change would be, we're doing this just to match the rules and laws. Yes.
Move that we change rule 0020-01.13. Was it section 2C?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
To read, to match the other page, to read it, $110. The fee for biannual renewal of the reciprocal certificate shall be $110.
This is Gabe. I second that.
All approved? Say aye, please.
Aye.
So moved. Recommend to the board to approve, please. Our third item may be a Mr. Whitaker item possibly, but it is a review of the regulatory flexibility analysis for rules with preliminary board approval.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Brewer. You are correct that this is one of my matters. The board has previously expressed its approval for a rulemaking hearing with a date still to be determined based on the pre-review process that has to be done for the rules. But this is regarding the change to add professional privilege tax non-payment as a specific disciplinary ground in the rules, and also to add the military applicant rule language that is required by a 2013 statute change, and also to clarify the penalty CPE requirements that the board discussed at the last. But at any rate, in order to do that, there has to be a regulatory flexibility analysis done. The board is familiar with these. We've done them in prior rulemaking hearings, but particular statute, which is TCA 4-5-401, and then some subsequent sections, require an analysis of what impact the proposed rule changes have on small businesses specifically, and some other things. I do have a regulatory flexibility analysis prepared, and I would defer to the committee's will as to whether the committee would like me to read the whole analysis into the record for the committee at this time. It's a couple pages, or whether the committee would simply wish to vote to send a regulatory flexibility analysis to the full board for review and approval at tomorrow's meeting, at which time the analysis could be read into the record and all board members hear it at the same time. I think either would work, and provided that the full board approves it, then it shouldn't be a problem, but I'm glad to do it either way.
I would just prefer to read it to the whole board. I mean, we'll all hear it at the same time, and all we'll hear it twice. So I mean, it may save you a little time, and I think it'd be good.
All right. In that case, if I could have a motion, second, and approval to refer the Regulatory Flexibility Act analysis to the full board at tomorrow's meeting for their consideration.
So moved.
Seconded.
Got a question. Is this a 2-page document that you're going to hand out to the board members tomorrow?
Well, actually, Mr. Hollis, I don't generally publish this because it's typically prepared for internal purposes only until such time as it's read into the record. So that's why I didn't give it to Ms. Condon and have it uploaded onto the iPads. Now, once it is read into the record and then it becomes a part of the minutes, that's no longer a problem because it's part of the rulemaking process. But when in the process of drafting this analysis, I've got to have it run up the chain and approved by my supervisor and potentially a couple of other attorneys before I can actually read it. This analysis has been approved, so that's not an issue. But we're typically advised not to hand that out until it is disclosed to the full board at a public meeting.
Full board, if we agreed to read it into the minutes now, we could not have a copy until it's read to the full board.
I would say that that's probably accurate. I mean, I could read it now, but if the board would like copies to follow along tomorrow, please let me know, and I'll be happy to print enough out.
I'm just being difficult.
Okay.
That
Well,
was a good effort.
sometimes you don't know these things. Just check.
So do we need this approved?
Motion on the floor.
Got a motion on the floor.
Okay, all approved, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. That is our last item on the laws and rules. Anything else we need to?
I'm aware of.
Thank you, Mr. Crocker.
Thank you, sir.
So we need to move to adjourn.
Look, I wanted to mention one thing. You all sent out yesterday or minutes of the committee meetings.
Yes, sir.
They were sent out. It's got on here that I was in attendance at the last meeting of the Law and Rules Committee, and I missed that meeting.
Okay, we will change that.
I got mixed up on my clock, and I came in at 2:00, and it was over at 1, so I'm sorry. But I was not present. Don't want to take any responsibility.
Meeting is adjourned. Mr. Crocker.
Great.
Sir.
Thank you.
Hey, Mark. This is Gab. Do you want me to call back just at 3? Is that the thing to do?
Yes, that'd be the thing to do.
All right. I appreciate it.
You've got some free time, Gabe.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Call the licensing committee to order. We've got several items to discuss. I feel like I'm so far away over here. The first item we have, I guess they're all four similarly related items, relate to firm applications for various accounting or CPA firms. I believe that all four of them relate to, let's see, what's the section? Rule 20-03-.15, item 2, regarding CPA firm naming rules. This rule, I'll just read it into the minutes. A fictitious CPA or PA firm name, that is, one not consisting of the names or initials of one or more present or former partners, members, or shareholders, may not be used by a CPA firm unless such a name has been registered with and approved by the board, and it is not false or misleading. So, with that in mind, we'll discuss each of these applications. The first one is from Real Tax and Accounting. I may need clarification on this. My understanding is that the applicant used to work for a firm, an unregistered, unlicensed firm, and that now is wishing to start his own firm, and with the name being Real Tax, make sure I get it right, Real Tax and Accounting Solutions. Is that correct? Real Tax and Accounting. And I think he sent the application in, and it's been referred to the board because it falls under the fictitious name rule, and so it's our job to discuss this and determine if it's okay or not, if it's misleading or not. So I'll open up for discussion on this.
That's the application, at least when I opened mine up, it says Sanders Associates.
He has since changed that to Real Tax and Accounting. Vic, we told him flat out he couldn't use Sanders Associates because his name wasn't Sanders and he didn't have any associates.
That was the name of the firm he previously worked for that was not
Thought they were
licensed.
trying to open a satellite office in a different city.
Are there any examples of anyone being called Real Tax or something like that? One of them we saw that had given examples of.
Don't have any examples for you, Charlene. Let me find that letter. We have in the past allowed several firms to have fictitious names, but we have since had some trouble with those names, so we are bringing these to the board for consideration in the future.
Let me read an additional item under the 20-03.15. If you read section or item 3, it says the board may disapprove of the use of any fictitious names that falls within one of the prohibitions listed in the paragraph of this rule, or if it determines after notice and hearing that the trade name is deceptive. Just throwing out the rules there.
Examples cited by the attorneys for one of the other applicants include Corporate Finance and IT Solutions, PLLC, Accountants and Business Advisors for Physicians, Financial Solutions, Inc., Reliable Financial Solutions, Inc., Reliable Accounting Services, PLLC.
I personally don't have a problem with this. Tax and accounting work.
Yeah,
Real tax
Real tax,
versus the
unreal.
fake tax?
Versus fake tax, yeah.
I mean, as stated, what was your last example, Mark?
Reliable Accounting,
Yeah, so I mean, I guess they determined it was
yeah.
unreliable, I mean, so I would agree with that. Not that it was unreliable with the name, I don't have a problem with. So I guess we'll have a motion to approve and accept this name, this applicant.
Move.
Have a second? Any other discussion?
Vote.
I guess all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, the next item is it's call 3, which my understanding it's reference to Colossians 3. New application. And again, everything's checked out except for the fact that it's a fictitious name. And we just need to have the same discussion.
Problem with the name. Well, go grab that now.
It just doesn't make any sense. I'm not sure.
Clarification, it's call 3 CPA, not just call 3. Thank you, Don. More discussion?
I think my only, my problem, I mean, obviously, it seems to be that it's more his problem in terms of a business. You know, if it's a marketing tool, the name of your business. But I am a little concerned that we could be, again, going in directions that we may not want to go in because we approve this name that's a little strange, the next one gets stranger, and I'm just, that in terms of a profession, it might, we don't want to go. That's just my comment.
Management or council have any issue with this or any comments or?
A comment, I mean, I don't have a Bible handy, so I'm not exactly sure what Colossians 3 whatever says. Certainly don't know if the board wants to give its imprimatur to whatever Colossians 3 says, and then this CPA is that kind of guy. I mean, that's up to the committee and the board as a whole. And the one thing that I guess that I see that's missing, as opposed to some of these other ones, you had the one that the committee just approved, real and reliable. I guess those are kind of adjectives, but if it's going to be something that describes maybe, as Dr. Spiceland pointed out, like a marketing tool or something, it's not like this guy saying, I want to be Colossians 3 CPA because I want to market to churches. That may be, but he didn't say that, and there's not any documentation to that effect in here, so I guess the farther away the business of a proposed entity with a given name gets from what the name purports to put out to the public, that's probably carries with it a proportionally increase of concern from the board. That's all. So, I mean, I'm not even saying the board might not eventually approve this if this name were somehow tied to Mr. Wright's business or his business plan, or, this is what I would like to try to do to market, and this is part of it, but none of that is here. And I mean, it's obviously a fictitious name, and so the board can approve, but
I think we're about to find out what Colossians 3 is.
Well, Colossians 3:23 is the reference that he gave me, and Colossians 3:23 reads, can I do this in a public meeting?
Part of the name, surely.
just read it.
Okay.
We'll ask for forgiveness later.
Okay, Colossians, you said that, Mr. Chairman. Colossians 3:23 says, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters.
Sounds like a good CPA.
That's a good,
I think the discussion point that we need to have, or the discussion we need to have first is, it goes along with what Charlene said about opening up the door I mean, if someone comes in and had an application for, I want to name my firm, the best CPA firm in the world, PLLC. I mean, are we gonna, what I'm saying?
Or Satan's house of CPAs.
You said that.
I mean, that's the flip
Yeah.
side of this very coin. I wasn't trying to be funny.
No, yeah, I
Maybe
mean,
a little.
I just think we need to probably have a discussion as a board about, do we want to open this door up, or do we want to keep it back related to, the old way of the original way, traditional way, it's tied to someone's name or a retired partner's name or something that's associated with the person, rather than it becomes a marketing piece. We can all have our, missions and mottos and that sort of thing, but the names, are all associated with an actual person. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that I think that's the discussion that needs to be had here to determine where, how far as a board we want to go with this, because it can open up doors that we may not be able to close.
I know in the last, the church name, one of the problems with that was that there had been other names of some professional, So I think that once we start approving this, we're establishing a Personally, I'd just like to see the whole board discuss this.
You can always vote to defer this particular application, to defer discussion to the full board. I mean, you guys have had your discussion, and then, you know, somebody asks, hey, what's the committee's view? Well, we talked about it and decided we should all talk about it.
Well, I mean, I don't know that it's not this specific item. It's all four of these. And actually, all five, the one that we're going to discuss again in a minute, the church financial, I mean, they're all related. You know, they're not, if it had been Smith accounting firm or CPA firm, you know, there's no issue there. I think that, you know, the issue is that it's not tied to that. It does require discretion and personal opinion, and, you know, that opens more doors. So, not to shy away from this from discussion, but I think that is something that the fundamental discussion that needs to be had before we make this decision is, where does this board want to go with in respect to our interpretation of this law? With that said, I guess we would shy away from it and let the board discuss it, but.
So you want to defer this to full board discussion?
I would like to do that. Do I need to make a motion, or can we just say that?
I would say yes, and if it's going to be, and also specify whether it's just going to be the call three or all of these.
To undo the motion we previously made to recommend, and
I would probably say yes if you want to discuss them all. Just, you know, the motion needs to be to withdraw the prior recommendation for real, whatever it was, and to defer all of these similarly situated applications for full board discussion tomorrow.
I'd like to make the motion to withdraw the former earlier approval and take this discussion to the board tomorrow.
Dick need to do that since he made the motion, or does it matter?
Doesn't matter.
Okay. A motion made and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Next item is review of revised name change request for Jeff Shepard CPA PLLC. I think this also is connected with the four we just discussed as far as the concept. I guess just some summary on this. We had a conference call, I don't know, April the 4th, I believe, and the board voted to deny the application based on the facts that it was not majority owned by a CPA. Is that correct?
Actually, it was majority owned by a CPA, but there was an issue in that the application contained an owner, although a minority owner, who listed a 0% amount of time spent at the working at the firm, and the rules don't allow that. So,
He's resubmit. My understanding is he's resubmitted his application. Nothing has changed with regards to the application. However, they have changed the ownership structure of the firm to comply with the ownership rules. Is that correct?
Yes. That is correct.
So now we're back to determining whether or not we want to approve this
Name.
fictitious name. Same discussion, I guess, as the four we've just had now.
well, since this is listed as a separate agenda item, if the committee's will is to defer to full board discussion, we'll need a separate vote for that.
We have a motion to refer this item to full board discussion.
I move.
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the next item is a review of policy statement regarding non-registered CPE sponsors. And let's see. I believe this came about by one of our members who I didn't quite understand all the timeline on it. He's a tax attorney, and he's also a CPA, and he's wanting us to discuss, well, there was three things. The requirement that non-exempt sponsors be registered with NASBA, the requirement for prior approval of a non-registered sponsor, and the limit of one exemption per reporting period. And those are the rules for non-NASBA or Tennessee registered CPE courses. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Karen, do you want to address this issue since you had the correspondence with Mr. Goodman?
Sure. Mr. Goodman submitted pre-approval applications for 3 CPE courses that he would like credit for, either classes that he had taught or taken. One of them was for the IRS, where he apparently instructed a program for them. The IRS, of course, is they don't have to register, they're exempt from sponsorship requirements. For that one, he only included an invitation to speak at that event and nothing, confirming that he had actually taught the class, so I had asked him to send that in. The other 2 were for the New England financial planning, and the Tennessee Bar Association, where he presented part of their program. The trouble I had with those is that he had submitted them a pre-approval request after he had spoken at the events. And I told him one request per reporting period, and that he needed to have them approved before.
In regards to the IRS one, has he sent you the additional information?
No, he hasn't. Nope.
Am I correct, there's a limit on how many of those you can do?
Right. You can get up to 16 hours of credit through a non-registered sponsor, and you can make 1 request for each reporting period.
Theoretically, he's made 2, if I'm not mistaken. You said the IRS was exempt from.
Right.
So if he provided that information, then that would be
Right, he would get credit
sufficient,
for that.
and it wouldn't need our.
He had instructed for 1 hour at an IRS presentation, so he would get 3 hours of CPE credit for that.
That would not fall under the 16 hours. It would just be normal CPE. We wouldn't have to approve any of that.
Right.
So the question is 16 hours.
The Tennessee Bar Association, I think, was only for 1 hour, and the New England Planning, I believe. So that was actually for 1 hour as well. But it wasn't clear from that. I believe he may have instructed those 2 hours, so he would get 3 times the amount. So it would be a total.
We're still within the 16-hour rule. The violation, the hang-up is because it was not pre-approved. Okay.
I'd also asked Mr. Goodman to, I clarified for him that he also didn't include confirmation that he had instructed the new series of emails where they were planning what they would talk about.
What do we consider valid supporting material for something like this?
Typically, it's an agenda or brochure that lists him as a speaker.
Mark, in the past, with regards to not getting pre-approval, because I believe in his email, he was wanting us to consider changing that rule, because his point was being he was the one assuming the risk of whether or not it was compliant, whether it was compliant or not.
We are pretty strict in assuring that they get pre-approval for horses before we award credit. Because we don't want someone to fall into the trap of spending thousands of dollars to attend something if they go to a 40-hour event and then send it in for CP credit and we don't allow it. I don't want to be in the position of telling them, sorry, you wasted a week of your time and your money. So just on pre-approval.
More for their protection than anything else.
I would assume there's also some time involved, and certainly you wouldn't want to be doing the research on the backside. It seems like it'd be something you'd probably prefer to do ahead of time so you could give it your full attention and really consider.
Yes.
He's wanting us to approve this, not change the policy.
I think he's wanted to do both. In his email, he offered himself up as Exhibit A. I believe that's the terminology he used to start our discussion. He mentioned, is he attending the meeting tomorrow? Do we know? I saw there was reference to a possibility of that.
He hasn't confirmed whether he'll be here or not.
Okay. So, I mean, I think that's two issues. Number one, he's wanting us to discuss these specific courses, but also for us to have further discussion as far as, the three items I read
Policy.
earlier, our
Yeah.
policy on that.
Aaron, is he short during a cycle or something? Is that why this is a big deal, or?
I'm not sure. He hasn't been audited. I'm not sure where he stands on his.
How did it come about? He submitted it subsequent to taking the courses, and then I guess y'all sent back and said it doesn't qualify.
He's taken in 2013? Do you know? And the follow-on question is going to be, do you know if 2013 was his reporting year?
New England Financial, it says 2/18/14 in Franklin, Tennessee, from 4 to 5 p.m. I assume it's p.m.
Which would indicate he has plenty of time to replace it. Unless it's,
I'm trying to understand, I mean, yes, I understand it. I mean, I understand he doesn't like the policy. So, if the board deems fit, the board can look at the policy and decide whether they want to make a policy change. But other than that, I mean, we have the policy. I don't know if we can deviate from the policy. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I understand he doesn't like it.
Pretty cut and dry as far as what the rules are.
But I mean, if it doesn't affect, if it just means he's going to have to go take another 3 or 6 hours, whatever it is that he thought he wasn't going to, I'm not sure why the term he uses gets him out of the fraternity he's been in for 40 years.
I agree with that.
I'm just talking out loud.
No, I agree
I'm
with
trying
that.
to understand.
It's not like it's already happened and we're past the deadline and we're trying to determine if we're compliant or not, as far as with our hours.
And under our policy, we would be able to give him 3 hours if he can just provide an agenda or something. Is that?
The IRS.
Yes,
Not trying
that's
to put
right.
words in your mouth, but that's what we'd be limited to. Under our policy, we could not give him credit for all 3 events. Is that true?
Yes, that's right.
Basically, he can get 3 hours of credit instead of 9.
I also feel like this is something he will continue to do because he makes it very clear he doesn't.
I mean, if the goal is that he wants us to consider a policy change, then that's not for this committee to do. I mean, that's for the board to do, I believe, right? Rulemaking or.
I think we could mention that as part of our committee report, that, there was a request for this, if that committee wishes to take it upon themselves to, study this issue and bring it for the full board. I think that would be my thoughts. Is that?
I think you're accurate, Mr. Eldridge. Yeah.
Is there anything else?
Sorry, I'm looking at Mr. Goodman to see if this is his reporting period.
Oh, okay. I mean, is there anything else this committee needs to? I apologize for being dense. I'm just trying to make sure.
Not like we're not denying the request. The rules deny the request. I mean,
Yeah.
Right.
Make it invalid. Is that right?
That's right.
And as far as the IRS CPE, then he would need to submit that, but that's more administrative process than anything else, correct?
Chris, is it your impression that as a committee, we would have the ability or the authority to override the rules?
Certainly not as a committee, because any board action requires a quorum, and this committee is not a quorum. So, I mean, any recommendation, I guess, is on the table, whatever you'd like that to be, but in terms of anything binding on behalf of the whole board, it can't happen with only three of you.
I think then, with that said, I think we would just make reference tomorrow that during our meeting, we had a request to review the rules on non-sponsored CPE, and, you know, just if the board wants to discuss it and take upon themselves to study it further, then.
I think we've got two issues. I think we need to bring the non-sponsored CPE policy up, and whether the board wants to, you know, take that to a committee or
Right.
consider changing it. But I also think that he's requesting that we somehow override our current policy, which I understand we can only do with board majority. Is that correct, Chris?
Well, that's presuming that sufficient legal authority exists for the full board to do it at all. It's just that from a committee standpoint, you guys don't even reach that question because numerically, there's not enough of you to do
Yeah,
it.
well, what I'm saying is, though, as a committee, we would take the issue to the board and ask the board.
Recommendation or deny it.
Right. And then,
Yep. I mean, we can give a recommendation, but I think the board would then need to vote on whether they want to override the policy. Is that?
I think I think it's sort of a different thing if there's going to be an overriding of policy versus an override of rules, because rules are more authoritative and powerful, not as much as a statute, but more so than a policy.
This is a policy issue.
Right. So that, I think that probably gives the board more latitude, leeway, and discretion to do that than if this person were making a request that the board go and fly directly in the face of the rules and do something that the rules don't say they can do.
Is it any different than somebody asking for an extension of time to keep their CPA parts? Or, I mean, does it fall in that category?
Yes and no. Yes, to the extent that there's board discretion there, but no to the extent if there is a rule or a statute that speaks directly on point that says it has to be X way, then no amount of board discretion or wishing it
Can override that.
to be different can go against that.
And to that point, with the extension, it's usually there's some kind of circumstance that a cause. This one is more, I don't agree with that, you know, there's a disagreement with the rules.
Well, and to carry your point forward, there are requirements that are applicable to the request for the extension, that if those, you know, the request requirements are not met, then the board can't even consider it. Like if they wait too long or something, then, you know, the board can't look at it and say, hey, you know, as much as we would like to do this, we just can't do it because it didn't comply with the requirements.
Just as a point of clarification, if he had sought and received pre-approval, then would he be eligible for all of these hours? Or is he only eligible? Trying to understand the pre-approval standard.
My interpretation, he would be, if he had pre-approved those other two, he would have been, that would have been okay.
I don't know if we would have really been able to approve it. He didn't give a lot of information about the courses that he taught and the content of the material. He gave us really very little information. And my impression was that Mr. Goodman feels that we endorse the Tennessee Society and NASBA and favor them and make it unnecessarily difficult to get CPE from any other sponsors. I included the letter I sent to him and let him know there are more than 2,000 sponsors registered with NASBA, as well as the society offering programs, universities, firms, government entities. There's a lot of places to get CPE. I think he just didn't ask for these to be approved in time and now wants to do it after the fact.
Also, in point of fact, this is more for the record than anything else, but during my tenure on the board, this board and other prior iterations have been, I don't know if liberal is the right word, but open to consider virtually any source or vendor for CPE as long as it teaches what it says it's teaching and the like. But again, kind of in the vein of this issue, those sponsors have to be approved too. They have to submit materials to the board to look at, and if they don't meet the requirements or don't do what they say they're trying to do, then they're not going to get approved either. So,
Vic, to your point, whether or not we can approve all three of them, this is, the policy says licensees may utilize this exemption one time per reporting period.
This exemption is the things that are not pre-approved?
Yes. That's what the policy says.
Yeah, so my question then is, if he had gotten the pre-approval, then would he be eligible for credit on all three, assuming that he supplied the documentation?
The way that I read this policy, no. We would give him pre-approval for one of the courses, and that would have been it.
He's only eligible for one pre-approval.
Yes, that's the way I read this. Now, that's my interpretation.
Isn't it two because the IRS is exempt?
Well, they're not included in this. I mean, he
Is that-
gets credit for that,
Okay.
provided
I
he
thought that
gives
was one
us
of the three.
documentation.
Yeah, I thought IRS was one of the three as well.
I thought it was Prudential or whatever, or New England Financial, IRS, and then a third one.
No, the Internal Revenue Service is an exempt organization. They are a government entity. So he can have that CPE provided he gets us the documentation,
Which leaves two more at question.
which leaves two more in question.
Okay.
And I'm saying we'd only give him pre-approval rights on one of those.
One of the two.
The
okay.
way that I read
Okay.
this. Now, you all can read it and interpret it differently.
So had he submitted these in time, then he, best case, would have gotten credit for one.
Yes,
Of
that's
the
the way
two.
I would have, that's the way I would have done it.
And at this point, we're deficient on documentation, even if we were to recommend it. Is that correct, Karen? All right, my recommendation is that this committee recommend to the full board that he receive conditional approval for the IRS and one other, contingent upon him supplying the required documentation.
Saying to circumvent the rule that requires pre-approval.
We would be circumventing the rule on we would in essence be giving him pre-approval for one, which is all he would have gotten to begin with, as I understand it. If he had sought pre-approval, what I just heard is he would have been pre-approved for one of them.
Right.
The IRS, he didn't need pre-approval. So his best case, his best day, if he had sought pre-approval, was what I'm recommending.
Does the staff approve, or does the board have to approve, at the recommendation of the committee, the quality of the materials that are supplied?
Normally, that is a staff decision.
That is a staff decision.
Yeah.
We have a motion on the floor to grant him, to recommend to the board, we grant him conditional credit for one of the two courses for which he did not receive pre-approval on. We would waive the pre-approval requirement for one of those two.
With the understanding that the IRS
He
should be
gets-
approved anyhow, right?
And he sends in all documentation for
Like any other CPE.
those courses. Okay, do we have a second for that? We have no second.
Sorry.
As long as you leave the gavel over there, we're fine.
The rule is the rule. I think I can read, you can read, he can read. He should have gotten pre-approval.
We need a motion to recommend denial?
Or he might be at a dead.
well, actually, if there's not going to be any pre-approval for one of the two included in there, then it would be,
Effectively, that is.
yeah, I mean,
Right.
it would only be a motion to approve the IRS contingent upon receipt of the documentation, plus deny the other two.
Policy stands if you don't.
Right.
I don't know if the IRS situation needs a vote, because that's just normal procedure.
Mark, have we given authorization for or approved a CPE after the fact, similar to this situation in the past? And I'm trying to remember, it seems like one meeting, we had someone sitting on one of the standard setting boards recently, and we approved. Now, I don't know if that was proactive or if that was reactive.
Oh, that was Jan Silvas, and that was the Gatsby, and that was proactive.
That was proactive.
Yes, she wasn't asking for anything in the past, she was
Okay.
asking for the future.
Do we have any precedent where we have waived the policy in the past? I know it's not good to waive. I'm not suggesting that we do, but is there any precedent?
I was going for the gavel.
I can't,
I'll have it in a minute.
Trey, I can't think of any time when
Okay.
when we have given CPE approval after the fact. But now keep in mind, most of the time, we don't run across this unless it's a CPE audit.
Right. I mean, I know it's a slippery slope. I guess the only thing that I say in defense of his request is, and it's a complete ignore, did he get valid CPE? I mean,
I really don't question,
and that's,
I know
if he
Mr.
got
Goodman.
valid CPE.
I don't question that he got valid CPE in my mind.
And that's where I kind of, again, I understand the slippery slopes. We've been down this path before. We got a CPA out there who's gotten valid CPA, or CPE, I'm sorry, too many acronyms, has gotten valid CPE, and we're going to deny it, which sounds like a technicality just because of the rules. Now, understanding our rules, understanding our policies, I hate to see a CPA denied CPE that is potentially valid, and just saying, sorry, rules are rules, I get that, but I don't know. That's just a commentary there. I'm
This
not
is not
on
a
this
rule
committee.
either, right?
Right, it's a policy.
It's a policy, it's not a rule.
And the board can vote to change the policy and vote to give him credit for this.
I agree with that point. I mean, if it's valid CPE, I hate to take it away, but, and, we discussed this a minute ago, we implemented this rule, and, and Mr. Goodman has a good point, that, he's willing to accept the risk, that, if he doesn't get it pre-approved and that sort of thing, then if he gets audited and it's not valid CPE, then it's on him, and I guess my thoughts would be if someone wants to assume that risk, well, why should
But at least this guy's actually bringing it to our attention.
Right, well, yeah, that's right.
Some of these people might just do this and not ask us.
I think
I don't know.
I think he wants to make a point here. And so in my eyes, I believe that if we feel that way, we need to address the policy.
I agree with that.
And so to make an exception for him just
Opens the door.
opens the door.
Yeah, I don't
So-
disagree with that.
Well, what about this as a recommendation? Because obviously, this is something we can discuss, and we could always discuss making that change. I guess the change would be the pre-approval portion of this, of that policy. Is that correct?
I don't see how you can get rid of the pre-approval process, because I think, as Mark stated, that is a protection issue, and that's what this board is designed to do.
Somebody's
So,
going to come back and
yeah,
file a
and
complaint against the board in that case.
And to Charlene's point, she has a very valid point, I think, in the fact that if this guy is trying to make a point on the policy and we grant him a waiver, then all of a sudden we've given him ammunition that the policy's bad.
Right.
So I guess I lean back now. I'm going to swing the other way and just say denied, I guess.
If I can refer you, if you've got your rule books, do they have the rule books, Karen? If you've got your rule books on page 62, page 62, and it's the last number 9 down there. In order to ensure credit, any program of continuing education not specifically covered by this rule must be submitted to the board for evaluation before attendance and/or completion. So we're dealing not just with a policy, but with a potential rule change.
Mr. Goodman mentioned that he would assume the risk, but I don't see how he would have had any expectation that these courses would be accepted because they're not registered with NASBA and they're not exempt sponsors. So without this pre-approval process, there's no chance of their being accepted for CPE.
I think the posture is now that it would be in contravention of the rule and that to change the rule, we have to go through a rulemaking process, right? So, I mean, even if we change the policy, it would be
Violate the rule.
violate the rule. You didn't need a motion. No.
I would say just a recommendation for this particular request to be denied with a citation to the rule that Mark just mentioned.
Say that one more time.
5-.04 sub 9. And that, based on that rule, Mr. Goodman, is that his name?
Yes.
His request cannot be approved due to the rule for the two non-IRS courses.
Do I need to read that in, or is it good, what you said?
Somebody can say so moved and second.
So moved.
Second.
More discussion on this? All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? All right. Last item we have is a request from Matt Shillington for a waiver of credits in lieu of experience. All right. I believe Mr. Shillington had graduated from college with an accounting degree, got a job in public accounting, and has been working full-time since January of 2012. When he applied through NASBA and his transcripts were reviewed, he determined that the rules have been changed from the 24 semester hours in accounting to 30. And he's asking for us to grant him a waiver because when he started in public accounting, graduated from college, the rules only required 24 semester hours of accounting. 2 years later, I believe, when he applied to sit for the CPA exam, the rules had changed to 30, so now he's not compliant. He's 6 hours short, and he's requesting that we grant him 6 hours credit through his working experience. So I'll open that up for discussion.
Guessing that Dr. Spicer and I are probably not going to agree on this.
I'm going to start wearing a striped shirt over here, a referee whistle.
You might be wrong on this.
Okay, well, I hope that I am.
I personally think that we grant 6 hours of internship accounting credit for working at the University of Memphis. I have no issue with this. He's been working full-time. So I feel like he should be able to get the 6 hours, or that, I guess we're not actually giving him credit, we're waiving the 6 hours. Is that the request? Because we can't give him
What's 6
credit.
hours of credit?
We, 6
Just,
hours of credit in terms of counting it as accounting. We're not actually giving him any credit.
Right, true.
He says, I'm requesting a waiver of the 6 additional college accounting credits in lieu of the experience that I've earned in the public accounting sector over the last 2 years. I agree with you.
Good.
I have a question, just for clarification, and I do agree as well. However, does this create any problems going forward in the future as far as undermining the 30-hour rule? You know, do we have people that, you know, they get to their 24 and say, well, I worked for 2 years or I worked for 2 semesters, you know, or whatever the equivalent is, and I'm just going to, you know, use that as a loophole to minimize the college credits that I have to get to sit for the exam.
We're not changing the rule, right? We're just granting this one-time waiver.
No, but we're
are.
creating a precedence
We
there
could.
that we've done this before now, and so now the door is at least cracked. Somebody's gotten through
But
it.
it appears that at the time that he graduated, according to this, the requirement was 24. The
Right.
requirement subsequently changed as I read this.
I'm just looking for some justification, just something to anchor to, that this is the reason why we did this rather than.
I mean, did we ask all those people who graduated in 2011, go back and get 6 more hours?
Yes. If they haven't applied for it, yes.
They hadn't
If
applied for
if
the
they have
exam.
not applied for the exam, they must go back and get the 6 hours. So I think the unique factor here is that he was unaware of the change. So he may have applied for it prior to, what was it, July, the last July?
The 11th,
Of 2013, that the rule went in.
2012.
2012? Okay.
So just hypothetical, if I've got a staff accountant that's not a CPA that's been working for me for prior to the rule change, and then all of a sudden they come in next week and say, I want to apply for this, I've only got 24 hours. And they say, well, I wasn't aware the rule change, which they may or may not have, but probably not. Does that set precedence for them to,
They would still have to ask for the waiver from this group. and
Right.
Explain that.
but it'd be hard for us to say no in that circumstance. That's my point. It'd be hard for us to say no under this, if it's the same circumstances. So have we, in effect,
I don't disagree, though, with Charlene's interpretation that we do give credit for internships, and therefore, is it really a stretch for us to approve those in the future, if case may be?
We could easily say, our requirement's 150 hours of work time for 3-hour credits. He obviously did a lot more than that. And I looked, actually, so the only internship he has down was a business internship. So, again, it falls within what we would have approved. So I think that does make it different in the sense that we aren't really opening the door. You would still have to come before the board and ask and meet all these specific things before we would really consider it.
can I make a suggestion that we require some sort of documentation as far as what the duties were as, for that work period? I mean, I don't know what he did. It was accounting.
At LBMC, according to this,
But what if he was just,
That's true.
working as a clerical person, or,
We could ask.
answer the phone, or, I don't, like I said, he may be doing taxes and audit, I don't know, but just to have some sort of requirement, that there's some documentation provided as far as what his duties were, to show, just like if you have an internship, I assume you have to prepare some sort of documentation as far as what your duties were.
And so if we were meeting internship requirements, he would have to show evidence of 300 hours of accounting work,
Right.
accounting associated.
I'm just trying to tie that in, since that's kind of one of the bases we're using is, and I don't disagree with this. I mean, I think but I want to make sure we think about it thoroughly before we crack that door.
Let me just make one comment in regard to the internship aspect of this. On page 43 of your rule book, it says, down there under 0020-02- under the education heading, B says, not more than 3 semester or 4 quarter hours may be internship programs, which may be applied to the 30 semester hours.
Oh. That's interesting.
So he has to take one class now.
But he already has one internship that that's counting
Oh,
toward the
it
business.
was
not-
management. That's
yeah.
why I said I looked.
Counting toward
because
business, not towards accounting.
It would not have qualified for accounting.
Yeah.
I think we can go against the rule, the law. I think we can allow 3 hours. That's all. Correct, Chris?
I believe, in light of what Mark just pointed out, I think that's right. If he's short 6 hours, I still think Stephen's point is well taken, that for those 3 hours, he should provide some documentation in support of it. Board approves that, then that means that, he'll just have to go wherever he feels, pick up that 1 3-hour course, and then he can be done. But I think that's an accurate take on the situation.
Mark, do we know if, so this is the education requirement that obviously went into effect in June 30, 2012. Do we know what if the education requirement that was in effect prior to June 30, 2012 had this same limitation
On the internship?
on the internship?
Yes, it did. We have not
Okay.
changed that at all.
Okay.
Mark, had he just applied right after college and just applied for one part of the exam, he's grandfathered in for life? Is that how that works? Say he
But he
takes
would have
one
been granted
section-
eligibility to sit for the exam, and
Yeah.
he's taken the exam. It doesn't matter when he passes, right?
Say he took one part, failed it, and waited 10 years, he would still be under the 24-hour rule?
That's something that I would probably bring to the board, but right now, if they applied for the exam before June 24th, 2012, which, when this went into effect, and they were applying with the 24 hours, and they had been accepted to take the exam, then they are grandfathered in.
His mistake was not making application during that 6 months, of which 3.5, I'm guessing, was his tax season or busy season, where
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's where I kind of hang up on this, is that, he graduated with an accounting degree. Is it right to ask someone to go back to school when they've graduated and they think they've fulfilled the requirement just because they decided to postpone, for whatever reason, taking the exam right away, to send them back to school? I know what the rules say, but I mean, obviously, this is.
We could pursue the
Right.
same thing with 150 hours. I mean, now we have 150 total semester hours. Someone from 15 years ago could come in and say, well, I didn't know it'd changed.
in this case, he missed a 6-month window. Right, he graduated in December of 2011. The rule changed according to this
Was it?
in June of 2012.
So it was only 6 months.
That's the way I read this.
Okay, I read it, but that's even. It's even worse, as far as the timeline goes. If he
That's what I'm
applied
saying.
6 months
I
before.
mean, it's not 15 years, it's,
Yeah, I'm just saying, but either way,
I understand slippery slope, it's just,
no, and I'm
for
with
whatever
you.
reason, where he messed up, he just simply didn't apply. We know for 3.5 months what he was doing and why he probably didn't apply. Not that that's an excuse, but
Well, and also just something to bring up, as long as the rulemaking process takes from beginning to end, that was probably going on while he was wrapping up school. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Because it's a 6 to 9 month process, approximately, from inception to notice of rulemaking hearing to AG's approval and to effectiveness. So I'm not trying to be a hardcore head case kind of person here, but if you're in a professional field and you are in school, it behooves you to know what the educational requirements are and if they might be changing. I mean, that's
And also, it doesn't actually say when he applied. What he says is, I discovered that in June 2012. It doesn't really say when he applied. He said, I got a job, I've been working full-time, when I applied. And it's April, so it kind of makes me think he just applied a couple of months ago.
Ooh, I got 2 years somewhere.
The other thing I'd point out is that he does mention the fact that you now require 24 hours of the 30 hours of accounting being upper division courses, and he only has 18 hours in upper division courses. So you're giving him out on two fronts. Yeah, keep that in mind.
At our universities.
True, but it's not we can't send them back, that's the conflict of interest. get commission from these.
Oh.
You have to have 300 hours to read.
I do have a question, though, as far as the
Kidding.
rule going, limiting to 3 hours, the internship. Is that something that we need to address?
I mean, that is something I'm taking back and making a recommendation that we only count 3 hours of accounting because we're misleading our students.
Right.
They aren't going to find that out until they apply.
Or do we need to reconsider the rule here?
One or the other. Something needs to be done because we definitely have a discrepancy. We're not the only university that allows the 6 hours in accounting. There are a number of them that do.
I would agree with that. I mean, I think today's world, we're encouraging more internships, and I think all of our firms, we probably have interns most of the time. To minimize that, I think we're doing a disservice to our applicants, because I mean, internship is a big part of the learning process.
A huge part of the learning process, and because we require already the 150 hours, one of the problems we continually have is what are we filling in for those 30 accounting classes that are really good experience and training for our students? Is it some throw together fluff class that we just give a name to and put someone in, or are we actually putting them out there where they're training? So if we're not giving them the full 6 hours, then somewhere we need to do something different.
Don, do you have?
I had a comment related to the timing of this one. Mark, is it possible for tomorrow you could contact this individual and find out the timeline on it? I mean, Chris spoke about the length of our process, and obviously we did everything we could to give timelines, to notify schools and all that, but that doesn't mean that with a small school with limited budgets and limited staff, that as fine a job as I think they do at Carson Newman, having worked with some of their people, I'm not sure that the message got down to the students that the requirements were being changed. And I would hate to penalize, because this window is not going to be very large that we're looking at, somebody and send them back to school because they weren't informed in a short window. Now, if he's been sitting and just delaying going back to school or doing whatever, then that's a different animal, I think.
If you're going to contact him anyhow, I'd be interested in when he applied for the exam too.
That's what I'm referring to, the timeline of when he did what, and that way we could maybe fill in some of the blanks on it. And I would agree with the comment. Now you're not making these classes up, are you, that you were referring to? But just glossing them over, you acted like you had authority in that.
No, actually, it is a pet peeve of mine that we have these,
But, an internship, to me, is better training in the classroom, oftentimes, and that both of us, the students and the employers, get a chance to see, is this person suited for public, private, whatever internship it happens to be. And if we're limiting it to 3, then maybe we need to revisit that and say we could go to 6.
The problem is that we recommend that they do 2 internships because we feel like that gives them a better view of not only what they want to do, but, what's involved.
Well, I think that
school
serves
credit
the
for that, too.
profession, too.
Right, it serves the
Right.
profession. So if we're only allowing 3 hours, that, again, is another,
So we
Other end of the
theoretically,
state does it 3 hours, and that's all they'll give them credit for. They encourage them to have other internships, but they only give them college credit for 3.
well, they're giving them college. Here's the problem. We're giving them college credit, but then we're seeing that the state isn't counting it. So when they graduate, they try to meet their 30 hours accounting, and they believe they have because we're giving them accounting credit.
They need 33 at your school to meet
Well,
30, right?
Unbeknownst to me, they do. Now, the reason this hasn't come up is because they're getting a master, most of them,
Right.
probably 80% are getting a master's, and so they get the extra accounting because they have to get a master's. But there are an awful lot of students now that come back just to meet those CPA requirements of the 150, and they don't know that they haven't done their 30
To that
hours.
point, I think the problem is we may not have kept up with the times on the amount of credit that's allowable for internships because they're much more prevalent than they used to be.
Yes, and we encourage it
Right.
more.
I would think to revisit
I think
an idea on the internships, but just getting a timeline would help us take care of this without setting a dangerous precedence.
So if we make recommendation for the board to consider changing the rule, is it 2002.02, not more than 3 semester hours or 4 quarter hours, maybe counted for credit, we could add him, we could make it retroactive to include him on this, on that change. Is that I'm just talking out loud, I'm asking clarification. If we change the rule, if the board changes the rule, we recommend to the board that the board consider changing the rule. Could we include him in that change?
I don't think that a rule with any kind of retroactivity in it will pass an AG's review. I think
We could pass the rule and then we could grant him one exclusion and
you would be doing so at your own risk, and I'll just leave it at that.
I hear what you're saying.
I don't,
That rule change is going to take how long?
minimum 6-9 months, probably closer to a year now. I mean, it just is how it is.
But I was going to ask further than that. The other issue he's going to have, though, is there was the advanced classes, what he had to have, I don't know the rules, was it
He needed 24 and he has 18.
18?
We would be allowing not only to count the credit, but also that he didn't get the required upper level, which internship does count as upper level, but we obviously have two separate issues, though. Right, Chris?
I think that's correct. And that's what you guys will have to decide to do with both of those. If anything,
How quickly can we deal with something like this? Because, I mean, he's pretty much in limbo for a while. You can't affect a rule change for some period of time.
Chris said it'd likely be at least 9 months to a year,
Yeah.
right?
And even then, we're still going to make we would still be needing to make an exception for him, because what we're saying is that it's okay that he didn't get the required coursework done in accounting. So we're still going to have to make an exception. But I guess the question is, can we make an exception that breaks the rule?
I would say not, and this is me thinking out loud here as well, since we're kind of kicking this around in committee, but let's say there's a future rule change because of this. This person, if he sticks with the application he has on file now, would be in the unfortunate position of having brought something to the attention of the powers that be to get it changed, but then not being able to benefit from the change because he's already got an application on file under the current set of rules. So, and me not being a CPA, forgive me if this sounds stupid because I just don't know how it works, but unless he were to withdraw that application and submit a new one post-rule change, but even that is, a long time from now, but that's about the only way he could probably do it. Because
You're saying-
otherwise, he's stuck with his current application date.
You're saying he's grandfathered into the new rule now, and if we change to a new rule, then he's,
Stuck with the new rule, yeah.
So
but he's the one that brought it to the attention. So
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I think, looking at this, I think that we can move to allow him to have 3 hours internship. He has, even under his current application, 200 days to get the other 3 hours, which could be in basket weaving. No, it has to be in accounting. So he has,
Oh, it's gotta be upper level.
he has 200 days to get that without having to withdraw his application.
or he could wait 9 months or whatever it takes
Or he
for us
could wait.
to change the rule. He would have to withdraw the application, then he wouldn't have to go back to school.
Didn't he just make the wrong request? I mean, if he had requested, for whatever reason, a good reason, that he failed to sign up for the exam prior to June 30, 2012, and he was requesting an exemption or a grandfather for that, then we'd be having a different discussion, would we not? Because we get those kind of requests all the time. Why people don't make it to Windows to sit for the exam, right?
Yeah.
Right, but the board has rule-based authority in existence to exercise some level of latitude and discretion on that.
That's my point. I mean, didn't he make the wrong request? I missed the first window because.
I guess that depends on when he applied.
Understand? I'm just.
Yeah.
We're all down here in the weeds in these rules, and the real issue is he just didn't. I mean, he didn't go for that exam during that 6-month period. I don't know why he didn't go for the exam during the 6-month period. But if his request had been that I didn't go for the exam in the 6-month period because my mama was dying or whatever other reasons we've approved in the past here, then we would have the authority to grant that, would we not?
Provided he had put an application on file within that time period before the June 2012 effective date. If he had put an application in before the rule change went in and then missed a window or something, that's a separate discussion. But because, unless I'm missing something here, and I doubt Mr. Shillington would be sending us this request if he had applied pre-June of 2012, then it's not quite an apples to apples comparison. I mean, I understand your line of thinking and your thought process, but it's two different situations because one presumes that he applied pre-rule change. The other one assumes what appears to be the reality that he did not.
I guess my question is, Mr. Royston suggested that we get the facts, right, when he did apply. But based on the tenor of the group, I'm not sure what that's going to do for us.
Push it 3 months down the road, I'm just saying that's all it's going to do. He's going to be close.
And if our posture is you didn't apply by June 30, so
Yeah.
you didn't apply by June
Right.
30.
Don't give him
We don't really
false
care
hope.
why.
Right.
Right.
We're not going to do anything about it. Then, I mean, why even go back and ask?
And I think just for records purposes, on the 1 in a million chance that he did apply on an appropriate date, somebody ought to ask because it's not in his email. I mean, I'm presuming that he did not, but nothing that I saw in here says I applied on such and such date. So I think regardless, we do need to know that so that we know which set he falls under. But I don't think that requires the board wait until July necessarily to the next meeting.
Well, if he did apply, he doesn't need our approval then.
It says, when I applied through NASBA and my transcripts were reviewed, I discovered that in June 2012, the rules were changed from 24 semester
Subsequent
hours.
to that.
Yeah.
Had
I
to
mean,
be. So presuming that it's subsequent, then the answer is probably no, and you need to go get the 3 hours. If the board is going to go under the cited subsection under the .02B and grant 3 semester hours for the internship credit, say, okay, now you need to go get the other 3 hours and go from there. Because you can get 3 hours of college credit way quicker than this board can do a rule change.
That's
You could do it in
exactly
1 month in the summer.
Cost to it.
I agree. So I'd like to make a motion that we allow him the 3 hours credit for his work experience if he provides evidence of his hours.
Description of his whatever
Provides
internship.
evidence of having worked at least 150 hours.
Okay.
And his description.
Second for that.
wearing me down, I'm telling you.
Worn out too. All right, so we have a motion A second, any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
I would now like to make a motion that we recommend the full board review this education experience requirement dealing with internships. Hours to 6 hours.
A motion to recommend to the board to consider changing the rules to making it we accept 6 hours of internship as opposed to 3. Do I have a
My
second?
only question is, just from a matter of protocol, does that need to go through the Law and Rules Committee as opposed to the full board?
Make the recommendation that it go to the committee.
That's, yeah, I'm just asking, is that,
Yeah, I would think so. Rather than the full board, it should go to the Law and Rules Committee.
Don't we, and then do a hearing for that specifically?
We try not to, because the process is so long and involved, we try not to do just one thing at a time. If
Right.
we can put together at least 2 or 3 changes. And that's how we try to do it. But I don't think there's anything hard and fast that says the board couldn't talk about it tomorrow if it were so inclined. But if you just want to go through law and rules, then that's fine as well. And just whatever you,
I don't feel strong about it either way. I was just asking a question. So,
Would that speed it up at all if we went on and talked about it in the board rather than going back to the committee and then back to the board?
Yeah, I mean, you're just talking about a 3 versus 6, and probably the whole board's going to have to discuss it at some point anyways.
That's right, and it's just
For the
a
board.
discussion anyway, and that way, if the full board feels strongly enough about it, then at least it's on the record about it in May as opposed to July. But, so that does move it up a little bit, but in terms of an effective implementation date, who knows?
I second the motion.
All right, so let's clarify this. We've got a motion to send to the full board a recommendation to consider changing the rules from us allowing 6 hours of internships from 3. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any other items? That's all we have on the agenda.
It-
A motion to adjourn. Second. There we go.
Pause, because it's 3 o'clock now.
It's killing me.
No, I thought somebody was asking who's calling in, and I said probably Gabe, because he thinks it's probably killing me.
I agree. I just wanted to see that I could get through that, and then we'll just refer everything to tomorrow's meeting, I guess. I looked at the financials. I didn't see anything of major consequence there. Travel was down overall compared to last year. That's reading that correctly, correct?
Yes.
For the same time frame. Okay. All right. I'm okay with the financials. Kind of the questions I had here was at the last meeting, you were going to bring up, sort of dig around for some information on, I believe it was cost on establishing the peer review oversight committee. It was in the minutes in January.
I didn't do anything on cost, Trey.
Or whatever,
I had some information on what other states were doing. in
Okay.
My executive director's report.
Okay, got that. So you'll cover that. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of getting through some of my questions here. So, we had also discussed the fact on the peer review process that you would look at whether or not it's possible for the board to supply to the society a list of people who had selected on their application the attest function and whether or not we could supply that with the society so that they could then cross-reference.
We have
List.
created such a list, and Karen, we can supply that to the society if they want it. I mean, it's ready and available.
Okay. Does that? Okay. And then the last thing, and I guess we're going to have to talk about this tomorrow. Just I can't do this solo, but we've been getting. I've had a request for a clarification of the CPE tracker tool and the use of the CPE tracker tool, and when it's required and when it's not required. That undoubtedly has caused quite a bit of confusion amongst the profession. I thought we had addressed that it was not a requirement, that there was always an opt-out on the use, but I couldn't remember if they came under audit what we had decided.
My recollection, Trey, was that when we concluded the conversation, Mr. Alexander asked for clarification on what Missouri did in regard to opt-outs.
Okay.
And we told him and the board that at that point, the opt-outs for Missouri were simply if they didn't have access to a computer. Otherwise, the CPE tracker was going to be required. Now, that was how we left it. Now, since then, I've had conversations with one or two other board members who were confused about that, so that's on our old business for tomorrow to discuss. We have not started CPE audits yet.
Okay. That's all I've got for now. I mean, I'll have to reserve the right for Casey and Bill to ask any questions tomorrow at the meeting, since they're not. Is Casey coming tomorrow?
Casey's not going to be here tomorrow.
At all? Okay. So Mr. Bloffice.
Mr. Bloffice.
Okay. Well, with that, I'll conclude the executive committee meeting. I don't know if I could have conducted it to begin with.
No, he won't be here. He's at a firm retreat that's required, apparently, and he couldn't get here.
You saw nothing of that? Mr. Whitaker, have anything else to pass out, or we're just going to work from the draft ones you mail? Mark, are we ready as far as, or we're waiting on somebody to call in? Gap was going to call in, I think.
Bates,
I'm here. Gabe's here.
So you're ready to go, Mr. Roy?
Okay. This is call to order the Probable Cause Committee for the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy, May the 1st, 2014. The records show Mr. Gabe Roberts is on the phone and is present. Mr. Whitaker, would you present your report, please, and give us any specific details that we might have? I know that you emailed a draft report out to us, and Gabe, anything that there have been no changes except some typographical changes in the report you were mailed and what we have presented in front of us.
Okay, and that's the report we received yesterday, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Royston. As you'll note, there were a few additions from the first round. I believe there are now 14 items on the report that you should have in front of you. Not much to add beyond the descriptions, just as general notes. Some of these are older complaints that have been sitting in litigation monitoring for a while, and it looks like we've now got some resolution on them, and it's that will allow us to get some of our more aged cases off of our report, even though it doesn't hurt us for accounting and record keeping and performance measure purposes. Still better to be able to wrap up old cases when you can. I guess the two things I would mention for special attention, items number 7 and 8, those are the cases on which the board retained an expert that has been discussed kind of off and on at the last meeting or two. The expert did render an opinion in his report, and we're now ready to dispose of these two cases based in part on that report. And then item number 10, there is a summary and recommendation there. And the reason that it's phrased the way it is basically it appears that settlement is imminent and that there will be an agreed order of settlement within a matter of days. However, I don't have that at this time. I am waiting on it from counsel in this matter. And so my thought process was if we're able to get an agreed order of settlement in, a few days after the board meeting, and then the board's own investigator can't turn up anything independent beyond that would lead us to believe we should go forward with a formal hearing, then if the board granted that conditional authority for dismissal, if the conditions met in the summary turn out to be true, then we wouldn't have to wait till July to get this off the report. But if this kind of being first time for a description and recommendation like this, if the board would rather say, hey, look, we'd just rather wait till the settlement agreement comes in and the investigator looks at it and you can report to us then, I'm happy to take that item off and table it until July. But figured we'd give the committee and the full board that option. And if the committee and or board are agreeable, then it can stay on the report. If they're not agreeable, we can take it off. So that's all the real points of emphasis I have. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chairman, for review and any questions once your review is complete.
Okay, thank you very much. Looks to me like we've got some of these actually go back just to the privilege tax and are more housekeeping than anything else. 1 and 2 actually do have substance to them. Gabe, have you had a chance to review the 1 and 2?
I have, yes.
What about you?
Yes.
We have recommendations from either one of you on the recommendation for the formal hearing, or on the first one with authority to settle with consent order, recommending a civil penalty of $5,000, a placement of the respondent's CPA on probation for 5 years, 2 hours of CPE, penalty hours of ethics. Any disagreement? Do y'all feel like that we need to know anything else on that particular one to make the recommendation?
I don't, Mr. Chairman. It's obviously while the conduct in question is not what you'd want to see from a CPA, and certainly doesn't cast the profession in a good light, I think it also does matter somewhat that this individual had 20 years of prior practice with no complaint history, that he self-reported and has already made restitution. I think that's a different posture than someone who got caught, hauled in, yanked in, arrested, and is facing criminal charges over it. And it's also worth noting that the organization from which these funds were misappropriated and then to which restitution was paid appears to be happy with the resolution of this matter between them and their now former treasurer. So but again, I always like to stress that these recommendations are just that, and that the committee and or the board may amend them as they see fit, and provided that the discipline is legal, we'll try and go after it and defend it.
Mr. Whitaker, I'd just like to know just kind of the reasoning behind the arrival at the $5,000 and then the 5-year probation. Not questions, just wondering what the thought process was behind it.
Well, the $5,000 appears to be a combination of a couple of things. It's a percentage, not an exact percentage, but a percentage nonetheless of the amount of funds misappropriated. And although individual acts of misconduct are typically capped at $1,000 per violation, because this conduct was ongoing and over the course of a period of time, in order for the funds to be misappropriated. It just seemed that given the conduct that more than $1,000 was warranted, but then it also didn't appear that should go so much further over the edge that, even though restitution's already been made, he gets fined or hits with a civil penalty that exceeds what was misappropriated and then paid back. So that's kind of how I got to the $5,000. And then the 5 years of probation, the Accountancy Act typically caps at 5 years the right to suspend, revoke, or place on probation. And, especially with the suspension and revocation, after that time, the board has to accept a reinstatement application if filed, but is not required necessarily to grant it. In this case, that I just thought the 5 years of probation sent a very strong message based on the conduct, in addition to the civil penalty, that, hey, look, you screwed up pretty good here, and if you're back before us within this 5-year time period, the likelihood that you're going to be looked kindly upon for being back in front of us is not good. So that's kind of my thought process, but I'm open to other feedback, thoughts, and persuasion, if there are any.
What was the amount of the embezzlement or whatever? Is that an appropriate question for this, or approximate?
Over 10,000.
This is actually, whatever our action is public record published on the website.
Yes, it is.
Further questions on one? Entertain a motion on this one to make a recommendation to the full board.
Yeah, I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
Sorry. I had my mute button on, sorry.
And I guess you have a second on it?
I have a second.
Yeah, that's good. All in favor, say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Number 2 is not nearly as egregious, but regarding CP, does anybody have either one of you have any problems with the recommendation that's been made with the penalty of CP, penalty of $1,000, 72 hours, total CPE, broken out exactly like he's qualified it here? Okay.
Yeah, no problem here.
Oh, I was
No problems.
trying to clarify who you were asking.
Let's move on down, and I'll save that one for all the motions at the end, because 3 is a privilege tax case. Any problems with it?
No.
4?
No.
No.
Number 4. 5 is privilege tax.
All right, that.
Okay. I think the other group is litigation monitoring status. So let's take a motion on 2 through 5. Do I have a motion to approve and make a motion to approve that and recommendation? Let's get it all out here. Go to the board for a full recommendation.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Gabe. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Number 6, do you need to speak to this one on litigation monitoring, or is that, you said 7, actually, the 7 and 8 are combined. Is 6 part of that, or it's a separate case entirely?
Item number 6 is separate. Items 7 and 8 are connected. One of the complaints is against a CPA, and then the other one is for the firm at which he was employed at the time.
I believe that all 3 of those, 6, 7, and 8, and 9 are recommendation to remove them from litigation monitoring status and dismiss the complaint.
Okay, Mr. Royce, can I just ask one quick question, Mr. Whitaker, on 6?
Sure.
Mr. Whitaker, is 6 there's just nothing really we can do because we've gotten to kind of at an impasse? Is that what the recommendation is on this one?
if you're asking for the kind of rationale for it,
Yeah.
you know, I think we felt pretty strongly about some of the allegations when the complainant was still with us. She's an elderly lady. I think she was in her 80s when the alleged misconduct occurred, and she passed away at the age of 91. And then it fell to her children as executors of her estate to decide whether to proceed with the civil litigation or not. And at the point she passed away, criminal proceedings had already been instituted as well, but the children, for whatever reason, they haven't disclosed that to us, but they made clear to the civil attorneys that they just didn't wish to pursue it any further, wanted the matter closed, and because they weren't going to participate and help anyway. And so with that, the civil lawsuit went away, and then in addition to the local district attorney's office, they could, without the participation of the now deceased complainant, they couldn't make their case either. And I think the securities division even took a look at it, but it was sort of the same thing. The level of proof and the need to authenticate it really came down to the complainant herself. And I think all three, from civil to criminal to securities, all looked at it and said, without this, we just can't make the case. And even with what we've been able to look at and gather, aside from that, I'm not at all sure that the board could make anything stick either. So it really, this is one that if we had been able to prosecute it while the complainant was alive, I think the chances were decent that something could have happened with it. But at the end of the day, you got to be able to carry your burden and prove your case, and just not sure that that's possible.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I would entertain a motion then, if we have no further questions on be 7, 8, no, it'd be 6, 7, 8, and 9.
So moved.
Second, Gabe.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Number 10 was the one that Chris spoke to us on a conditional approval. Do we even have an idea, though, Chris, what this settlement might even look like and whether we want to pursue it based on? I know you've got conditions above here that if, and I understand the idea of keeping things off a list, but
Sure. I think I can give you a little more, if not the whole story. But as I understand it, an agreement on a settlement payment amount has been reached, and there's also an agreement that the agreement itself will not contain any admissions of liability or wrongdoing by the respondent who is paying out the settlement. Frankly, that, most times just opposing counsel or respondent's counsel representation to me is fine and will carry some weight and go a long way. But because I don't have paperwork, that's why I phrased it conditionally as I did, because it's just, I wasn't comfortable saying, as I was with the others, where, in the case of settlements, as in number 9, where I do have paperwork and I know what that looks like and there's no uncertainty. I don't have that on this one. So my thought was, okay, well, if the board were inclined to say, okay, well, Mr. Whitaker, if that paperwork comes in the door and it looks like you say it does, and then there's no other issues based on our investigation, then we could go ahead and get rid of it. But if not, then as I mentioned earlier, I'm not at all adverse to tabling this to July to just wait and see what we get.
get an idea of the size of the settlement and whether there's a insurance company paying it or whether it's individual paying it or anything?
Not at this point. I'm sure I could inquire as to that. Not sure how much information I would get depending on the level of confidentiality at play or required, because some settlement agreements are like, yeah, we're going to pay out this money, but only if the settlement is confidential. And so I don't know how that's going to look either.
Like to weigh in on that?
No, I don't think they have a lot to operate with right now. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, what do y'all think about keeping it on the report until next meeting, just to give Mr. Whitaker enough time to follow up after, the agreement's entered into?
I personally am not comfortable not knowing any of the facts, and I mean, I place a lot of faith in our team here, but and that they would bring it back and all, but I don't want to set a precedent that
Right.
that we have something and have it show up later that we should have looked at it. So I'd rather defer on that one myself.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree.
We'll take a vote to leave that one on there. All in favor, say aye. I think
You
that was the
mean-
first and the second.
Mr. Royston, I think if you're deferring it to July, the motion will be to remove it from the report that goes to the full board, not to keep it on here.
So it will not go to the board at all then?
It will not.
Okay. And was that your motion, Gabe?
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Okay. And Vic seconded it. Passed unanimously. Boy, thank you, Vic. Anybody have any questions on 11 or what we do with them, or any recommendations on any changes? Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I don't.
All right, what about 12?
I don't have a question.
Okay. 13? What about 14?
Yeah, I don't have anything.
Good deal. All right, then if I would entertain a motion then to recommend to the full board approval of the recommendations from 11 through 14.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion passes. We have any more business to come before the probable cause committee? Hearing none, I would say we're adjourned. Thank you, Gabe.
Thank you. Sorry for being absent in presence, or physical presence, I guess.
Not a problem. There's nothing wrong with a second from the clouds.
Hey, as long as you'd have to look at me, so that's a good thing, I guess. Right?
Thank you, Gabe.
All right, thank y'all.